What if Elijah hadn't faced the prophets of Baal? What if a single moment had changed the entire course of faith in Israel? Picture Mount Carmel, the epic setting where Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal. Now, imagine, what if he hadn't climbed that mountain? What if he had backed down from the challenge? Today, we'll explore how one man's hesitation could have transformed the entire story. Elijah knew the confrontation was dangerous, but he also knew the truth needed to prevail. Yet, in this alternate universe, he didn't show up. Something changed. Maybe fear, doubt, or even a moment of weakness. The result, a completely different story, a story that will make you rethink the impact of your own choices. What you'll discover today isn't just a reimagining. It's a journey into the what if of one of the Bible's most powerful stories. A world where God wasn't publicly exalted that day? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to explore this intriguing possibility. And who knows, maybe we'll learn something that could transform how we face our own battles. A quick warning, you might finish this video with more questions than answers, but isn't that what makes the journey all the more fascinating? To understand the impact of a scenario where Elijah didn't confront the prophets of Baal, we need to revisit the original story. Imagine Israel at that time, divided, confused, and drowning in idolatry. King Ahab was spiritually weak and married to Jezebel, a queen as ambitious as she was devoted to the god Baal. Together, they turned Israel into a stage for idol worship, promoting pagan sacrifices and persecuting the true prophets of the Lord. At the center of this chaos stood Elijah, the lone prophet, the man chosen by God to be his voice during a time of spiritual darkness. Elijah wasn't just anyone. He had boldness, courage, and a direct connection with God. But being a prophet during that era wasn't for the faint-hearted. Jezebel had ordered the extermination of the Lord's prophets, leaving Elijah as one of the last willing to speak in God's name. Now, the context. After years of drought, a drought that Elijah himself had announced as God's judgment, the prophet received a clear command from the Lord. Confront Ahab, challenge the prophets of Baal, and show Israel who the true God is. The mission was clear, but dangerous. Baal was regarded as the god of rain and fertility, and his reputation was on the line. Elijah was about to expose Baal's falsehood in front of the entire nation. The confrontation was set for Mount Carmel, a location strategic both geographically and spiritually. There, before thousands of Israelites and 450 prophets of Baal, Elijah issued the challenge. The God who answers with fire, he is God. It was a moment of absolute suspense. The prophets of Baal went first, shouting, dancing, even cutting themselves to gain their God's attention. Hours passed, but no fire came. Baal remained silent, proving he was a false god. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord, symbolizing the restoration of the covenant between God and his people. With simplicity, Elijah prayed a powerful prayer, asking the Lord to reveal his greatness. And God responded. Fire fell from heaven, consuming not just the sacrifice, but also the wood, stones, and even the water around the altar. It was such an awe-inspiring demonstration that the people fell to their knees and declared, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." But what if this story didn't unfold this way? Elijah received God's command to confront the prophets of Baal, but something inside him hesitated. Perhaps it was the weight of isolation, perhaps the fear of Jezebel, who had already killed so many other prophets. Or maybe he wondered, what if God doesn't respond with fire? What if I'm exposed and humiliated in front of everyone? This time, Elijah doesn't climb Mount Carmel. He doesn't summon the people to choose between God and Baal. Instead, he flees, perhaps to the same cave where he later hid after Jezebel threatened him. But unlike the original story, there's no triumph before the flight, only silence and an unfinished mission. Meanwhile, in Israel, idolatry grows stronger. Without the confrontation on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal continue their rituals, emboldened by the lack of opposition. Jezebel feels not just victorious, but begins an even more intense campaign to eradicate any trace of worship to the God of Israel. The people, on the other hand, remain divided. Without the display of God's power, they have no clear reason to abandon Baal. After all, to them, it seemed like both Baal and the Lord were silent. Why choose a God who doesn't show himself? They might think. Gradually, idolatry becomes not just tolerated, but institutionalized. Elijah, hidden in his self-imposed exile, faces a devastating internal dilemma. He knows he was called for something greater, but the weight of responsibility consumed him. In his mind, he replays God's words, the call to confront Ahab and the prophets of Baal. But now, it's too late. He feels the weight of guilt and regret for not trusting the Lord. Worse still, Elijah witnesses the consequences of his choice. He hears reports of how Jezebel intensified the persecution of prophets, how the people sink deeper into Baal worship, and how Israel drifts further away from the true God. The nation chosen to be an example of faith to the world now becomes an example of idolatry and spiritual destruction. Without the confrontation on Mount Carmel, what happens to Israel? For starters, the altar of the Lord remains in ruins. Without Elijah to rebuild it, the symbolic connection between the people and God is lost. Mount Carmel, which should have been a milestone in Israel's history, becomes just another forgotten place with no spiritual significance. Jezebel, seeing no opposition, consolidates her power. She decrees that Baal worship is mandatory, and anyone who refuses will be severely punished. Fear spreads, and even those who still believed in the Lord start hiding or pretending loyalty to Baal to survive. The most devastating consequence, however, is the spiritual impact. Without the fire from heaven affirming the Lord's power, the people's faith weakens. They lose trust not only in Elijah, but also in God. Idolatry isn't just an individual issue. It begins to erode the nation's identity. Israel's history has always been marked by God's intervention in critical moments. From the Exodus to the conquest of the Promised Land, God consistently demonstrated his power tangibly. The confrontation on Mount Carmel should have been another of these demonstrations, a moment to remind the people that the Lord is the true God. Without this event, God's plan to rescue Israel suffers a significant setback. Idolatry isn't challenged, the people aren't led to repentance, and the covenant with God isn't restored. Future generations grow up in an environment where Baal worship is normalized. Stories about the God of Israel become distant legends, almost like myths of a forgotten past. And the promise that Israel would be a light to the nations drifts further out of reach. This alternate story forces us to reflect on our own lives. How often do we let fear or doubt prevent us from fulfilling our purpose? How often do we hesitate to make decisions that could impact not just our lives, but the lives of those around us? Our choices carry more weight than we imagine. It's not just about us. It's about the people around us, our families, our communities. Elijah had a clear mission from God, but in this what-if universe, he chose silence. And the result? A devastating impact that echoed for generations. Now let's apply this to our own lives. How many times have we faced decisive moments and hesitated? Maybe it was a difficult conversation we avoided, a truth we didn't have the courage to defend, or even an opportunity to do something extraordinary. But fear held us back. Elijah's example teaches us that God calls us to act even when the task seems impossible. It's easy to think, but I'm just one person. What can I do? Elijah was also just one person. Yet in the original story, he had the courage to obey God, and the impact of that obedience transformed an entire nation. In the alternate scenario, Elijah's absence on Mount Carmel wasn't just an individual failure, it was a collective failure. The people of Israel remained divided and directionless because the leader chosen by God decided not to act. This is an important lesson. Our inaction doesn't just affect us, it impacts everyone who depends on our courage to move forward. Think about your life. It could be something small, like supporting a friend during a tough time, or something big, like standing up for your faith in a challenging situation. Every choice we make or fail to make has an impact. As Christians, we're called to be light in a world full of darkness. But how can we illuminate the path if we don't have the courage to light the flame? It's normal to feel fear. Even Elijah, the great prophet, had his moments of weakness. But there's a difference between feeling fear and being controlled by it. In the alternate scenario, Elijah's fear extinguished the fire of his mission. And this happens to us too. How many times have we avoided taking action because we thought we weren't good enough, that we might fail, or that the consequences would be too hard to bear? The truth is, when God calls us, He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He only expects us to trust Him. Instead of focusing on fear, we should ask ourselves, what can God do through me if I simply obey? Elijah, in the original story, faced an impossible challenge. He stood alone against 450 prophets of Baal and the full weight of idolatry in Israel. But he trusted God, and God showed His faithfulness. This reflection doesn't end here. What would happen if all of us decided to act when called, even when the task seems hard or frightening? Think about the difference you could make in your home, at work, or in your church. Elijah reminds us that our choices matter. He was just one person, but his obedience had a national impact. You too have a role to play in God's plan. It might seem small now, but every act of faith is like a seed. When planted, it can grow and change lives in ways we can't even imagine. The idolatry Elijah faced isn't so far removed from our reality. We may not be building altars to Baal, but how often do we place other things above God? Success, money, relationships, anything that takes God's place in our hearts becomes an idol. And just like in the alternate story, silence in the face of idolatry is dangerous. When we choose not to confront what's wrong, whether in our lives or in the world around us, we allow those idols to grow and take control. Today, our Mount Carmel could be any situation where God is calling us to act. It could be fighting for justice, supporting someone who's suffering, or resisting the temptation to place something above God. The question is, will we hesitate like Elijah in the alternate scenario, or will we obey as he did in the original story? The story of Elijah, whether in the original or alternate version, challenges us to look within ourselves. What are the mountains God is calling us to climb? What situations require our courage and obedience? It might seem daunting, but remember, God never calls us to something He doesn't equip us to do. If you're facing a challenge today, trust that He is with you, just as He was with Elijah. Even when it feels like you're standing alone against the world, know that with God, you are never truly alone. So, what did you think of this alternate version of Elijah's story? Could he have really fled and changed the entire course of Israel? But hold on, this is just one of the endless possibilities we can explore. The Bible is full of decisive moments like this, and each choice shaped not just the lives of the characters, but the destinies of entire nations, and even ours. Now, I want to hear from you. What other Bible stories do you think would be interesting to explore? Have you ever wondered what would have happened if David had lost to Goliath? Or what if the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had said yes to God? Share your suggestions in the comments. Who knows, your idea might become the next video on this channel. If this content made you reflect, share it with someone who could benefit from this message. Sometimes, it's exactly what someone needs to hear to understand the impact of their own choices. And of course, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. Here, Every episode is a journey into the untold side of Scripture, a chance to see the Bible in a completely new way. Finally, here's my challenge for you. Reflect on the mountains you need to face today. What is God calling you to do? Are you hesitating or trusting? Think about it, and remember, just like Elijah, you too were called for a greater purpose. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll explore another story that will surely make you think. Until then, keep walking in faith and be inspired to make the choices God has placed before you.